Alright, behind me, we've got the 56 Chevy. Dad's got it up on the lift here. He pulled out the axle shafts out of the rear housing. We're going to go ahead and put some longer studs in the axle shafts so that it's better for drag racing, a little bit stronger studs, and then they'll fit the wheels that we have. We got to put some new U-joints in the drive shaft, get the drive shaft put back in, and then mock up the front drive shaft loop on this as well. So Dad's got the axle shaft mocked up in here. It's got the longer studs. It's got the back side of it pressed up against this plate here. We're just using a socket to press the shaft down over it. Alright, while my dad's getting those studs pressed into the axle shafts, I'll just show you. This is our stock stud here versus our aftermarket. So it's literally double the length. That's just going to add strength to it, and they like to see all threads on your lug nuts being used for drag racing. It's just a safety thing. So while he's doing that, I got some Spicer non-greasable U-joints here that we're going to be getting into this nice candy cane green and silver drive shaft that we painted up a while back so that we can slide it into the car. Now that the drive shaft is in the car, looks pretty sweet, that candy cane design on there. We've got some flat bar stock here. This is, I think, quarter, or what is this? It's 1/4 inch by 2 inch, and that's the NHRA regulations for drive shaft loops. It has to be 6 inches within your front U-joint, and it has to be 1/4 inch thick. Used to be a pipe here. Well, you had it cut in half. We're going to have an upper piece that's bolted in all the time with this flat stock sticking off of it, and then we're going to have the lower piece be removable with some tabs on it so that when we need to pull a drive shaft or pull a motor and trans or whatever we got to do to this thing, everything's nice and removable. Alright, so for the first step of making this trans loop or drive shaft loop is I measured what the distance was on the top of those rails. I'll show you in just a second. It came out to 16 3/4 stretching across. So that would leave me 5.5 inches on each side of my loop here. So I'm going to basically cut out the center, but I'm actually just going to cut two 5.5 inch sections out and weld them on the end of this loop facing this direction. And that'll cover our distance for the top part of this loop. The bottom side, I'll cut probably like a about a 2 inch tab for each side of the loop, and then that will come up to the bottom side and bolt right on to these 5.5 inch pieces. So first step here, I'm going to measure out my 5.5. We're going to put a little mark there. Run a straight edge There's our first 5.5. I'm gonna cut this on the bandsaw so I don't have to really account for like an 1/8 inch is what I normally do for like plasma cutting it or something. This because when you use a plasma cutter, it cuts so much material away. So the bandsaw's blade is very thin. Doesn't have to be perfect for what we're doing here. So that's 5.5. 5.5 equals 11. Perfect. So we'll make these 2 cuts, and then those will go right on the side, right on the side of this loop. There goes our first one. All right, with our 2 5.5 inch pieces cut out, we've got this upper loop. That is exactly how it's gonna go. That way there's nothing in the center and the drive shaft can ride through there. Next, I'm gonna be waiting for my dad to come back out. He just got a new TIG welder. He wants to practice TIG welding, so we're gonna TIG weld the drive shaft loop up. We're gonna slide that out of the way and cut these 2-inch tabs for the bottom. So we'll get those marked out real quick. Same deal, not real worried about the precision on them here as long as they're pretty dang close. The bandsaw blade is thin enough and we don't lose a lot of material with it, so I'll just run a straight edge on that one and on this one, and we'll make those 2 cuts. So there's only one more cut I need to make, and what this is going to be for is the tabs will actually mount up here a little ways. We're going to run a straight piece on the bottom loop here. That way it adds our height, and the opening for the drive shaft loop is bigger than just that pipe closed up. Just a better understanding of what I'm meaning is the straight piece I'm talking about will be, this is 4 inches, so I'm going to run another 4-inch cut on the bandsaw there. And that lower tab or the lower piece will have its tabs way up here that will mount up. We just don't have the room for that big 2x4 cross member up in the front, and there's not really any need for it right there, so that's why we're keeping it nice and light for the front. Now I'm gonna measure for those 4-inch pieces that we need to cut next. So let's put one at 4. 1 at 8, run our straight edge on there, and we'll cut these out. And this is the design we're going for here, just so you guys can imagine it a little bit better. This will be our top one up here, and then our lower with the 4-inch extension and the 2-inch tab, and we'll drill holes through here and bolts. That way the lower half of this loop is removable. So here we have the removable lower and the upper, and those will go in there and wrap around the drive shaft 6 inches back from the U-joint. Dad's got a blown out shoulder, so he won't be testing out his new TIG welder over here. We just tacked it together for him so that he can TIG weld it this week and get the other axle shaft done with the studs on it and get the drive shaft loop in. And then we can set this thing on the ground and move on to the next thing. With the colder weather rolling in and everything, we're going to be more inside. I know 2 weeks ago I posted a video and said that we were going to be going to Lapeer for with the Outlaw gassers. They ended up and canceled that race because it was cooler out that day and the track temps weren't proper to run. So that was going to be my last race of the year. I've still got to put Loud and Ugly away for the winter. I got to pull the valve covers off, pull all the valve springs, and just drain some fluids and get things buttoned up that way. I may do an episode on that, so you might get to see that one more time before the snow flies here. But we've got plenty of stuff to do in the garage this winter. We'll pick back up on this 56 build, and then we've got my mom's truck over here that has lots and lots of stuff to do to it. So like I've said in previous episodes, we've got plenty of stuff to do, and we'll be putting some content out this winter for y'all.